So the pursuit of something incredibly noble takes place on our campuses every single day, which is the pursuit of a better life. That is, that has the upswing of changing generations to come, building up communities, being anchored within the community. The vast majority of our students are commuter students who are from the community. So to stand for something incredibly noble, right, which is to honor their pursuits and to call on our campus, its leadership and external stakeholders to engage with the exact same level of resiliency and grit and persistence that our students put on display every single day. And I think that that's worthy of emulation. And so, yes, there's a lot of talk about.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to EdUp Accelerated Excellence, a podcast for the advancement of educational effectiveness and equity across both traditional and non-traditional learning experiences and contexts. I am your host, Jacob Easley II, PhD, PMP. In this episode, we sit down with and learn from the interim president of New Jersey City University, Andrés Acebo, and he shares with us how his faith, authenticity, and compassion have been tools for leading the organization from crisis to recovery to revitalization. Let's get into it. In life, we're taught to expect the unexpected and to accept the things that we're not able to control. This episode was recorded with unintended technical difficulties, but the content was just too important to pass by. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome back to another episode of EdUp Accelerated Excellence. Today we sit down with Andrés Acebo, who we affectionately and lovingly in the community refer to as Andy. He is an accomplished higher education leader, a trained lawyer, a public advocate. I would say he's a statesman, and he's a son of the great state of New Jersey, which I believe is important for our conversation today. Welcome to EdUp Accelerated Excellence.
Thank you, Jacob, for the honor to join you this morning.
Excellent. So we're going to get started. There are at least, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, 38 four-year colleges and universities in the state of New Jersey.
That's correct, yeah.
Can you describe for me New Jersey City University and its uniqueness within the state?
Thank you for that question, Jacob. Yeah, so look, we find ourselves in the heart of perhaps one of the most diverse regions in the country. I would dare challenge maybe even the world. That is riveting with a lot of the temperance that grace of first generation communities bring to bear, of a mission that is anchored around economic mobility and social upward mobility. One of the most vibrant parts of, I think, the community that surrounds our campus and that finds its way onto our campus is a dedicated group of people who have the tenacity and the grit that I think our mission personifies. This institution was founded as a teacher's college, as New Jersey Normal School, nearly a century ago. Evolved into Jersey City State College, ultimately then becoming New Jersey State University in the late 90s, and again, on the precipice of our centennial. New Jersey City University, very uniquely compared to our peers, and no shade intended to any of my sister institutions, but very deliberate in its mission. We serve the most socioeconomically diverse student population of any four-year public university in the state. The median household income of our students, Jacob, is $42,000 a year. Median, right, in northern New Jersey. Again, a state that is incredibly diverse, that is, by the time the next census comes around, I think most people conservatively forecast will become a majority non-white state. The demographic tides be what they are. I think institutions like NJCU, who are proud minority serving, Hispanic serving institutions. I like to remind folks that we were an HSI and MSI before the federal government created those designations. Uh, really grounded and has a special role and place in the higher ed ecosystem in New Jersey.
Right, excellent. We're going to talk about the minority standing or minority recognition for NJCU. So you rose to the rank of interim president of NJCU amid what some have publicly noted as a financial emergency. So I just want to get that out
Sure.
front. From the outset looking in, and this is my perspective, your strategy and that of your team has been a masterclass in crisis management. So, do you care to share a bit of context? But certainly for other higher education leaders, what have you learned about managing crises and turning them into, and I'm going to use a riff off of your words from one of your interviews prior, what could be viewed as an opportunity of hope?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think if there's no test, there's no testimony, right?
Oh, wow,
Uh,
that's
right, and I think that that's what's being professed right now on our campus. There's a lot more work to be done, but I was particularly deliberate about wanting to invoke and ignite passion in people to do the hard work, recognizing that I was going to be, because of the charge that I was accepting, going to be expected and required to make decisions that many people would find disagreeable,
mhm,
but that I needed to anchor folks around a mission, one that for many on this campus had not been honored for a very long time. And so, yes, the things that this institution was perhaps disproportionately plagued with in its timing and its scale are not unique to this institution, right? Higher education is at an inflection point. I think the disruptions that have upended other industries and other spaces are finding its way onto our campuses. The business model has not evolved, particularly for public institutions of higher education that have become increasingly tuition reliant institutions. The amount of state funding that goes to public universities has, to put it diplomatically, remained unimproved in more
mhm,
than a quarter century in many instances. Um, and so being able to speak to that, I mean, I've taken it as a badge of honor when folks tell me that I'm too passionate. I think that's a reminder that some folks may perhaps have not been passionate enough. Um, and so that's what I've tried to speak to, right? From crisis, and this is not mine, right? Like it's like the old adage, crisis doesn't create character, it reveals it. And
mhm,
what I've sought to do with our team and kind of enculturating this expectation is that there are folks on my campus, first generation, primarily Black and Brown students,
mhm,
crisscross our campus who don't know anything about a fiscal emergency, who don't know, whose families' fiscal emergencies figuring out how to get to their next meal
mhm,
and not get evicted from their homes. And so the pursuit of something incredibly noble takes place on our campuses every single day, which is the pursuit of a better life that is
mhm,
that has the upswing of changing generations to come, building up communities, being anchored within the community. The vast majority of our students are commuter students
mhm,
who are from the community. So to stand for something incredibly noble, right, which is to honor their pursuits and to call on our campus, its leadership and external stakeholders
mhm,
to engage with the exact same level of resiliency and grit and persistence that our students put on display every single day. And I think that that's worthy of emulation. And so, yes, there's a lot of talk about financial deficits. I spend more time than maybe even some folks may even realize looking at balance sheets and financial statements. But I've made a concerted effort with my team of making sure that we spend equal time looking into people's eyes
mhm,
and showing that face time and engagement and making folks feel and embrace a sense of being proprietary over the success of our institution. And so I appreciate the kind recognition, but as tends to be the case, right? I've got the embarrassment of riches here, where uh, it's kind of like the old Churchill quote. Um, like I find myself being the lion,
Mm.
for our campus, but the campus brought the roar.
Hmm. Well, I really like the fact that you stated that even though, things are looking very up in terms of the financial, what I would say has been a financial emergency. I like the fact that students did not have to feel the pressures of
Right.
that circumstance. And I think that's a sign of good leadership. So
Yeah.
all of this happened coming off of a worldwide pandemic. You ascended to the role of interim president. You're managing, as we just talked about, the financial emergency. How were you fortified personally and professionally? And what keeps or has kept or perhaps continues to keep you going and fortified?
I think that's a tough question, right? I think it changes from time to time, but at its core, I think my faith is incredibly important to me, right? I
Mm-hmm.
do believe that I'm here on assignment, and I think, look, 60 years ago this summer, my dad came to this country on a raft, escaping political persecution.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that his firstborn son, his only son, can rise to the ranks of being a university president,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that I've been blessed and privileged by being the beneficiary of someone else's sacrifice and hardship and struggle, that my sons are a generation removed from that, is a testament to the promise of higher education, right? So every single day, I get the privilege, because it is a privilege, to try to enshrine that and preserve that
Mm-hmm.
for folks who may never know my name, who may never see my face, because somewhere at some point, someone did that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Someone cared about where my story began. Doors were intentionally left open behind me. People sent the elevator back down for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like those things are important. So I think it's faith. But then, Jacob, there's also, as tends to be true, I think, for most professional challenges, that I don't subscribe to this idea that the professional can't be personal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the things that most ground you are things that are personally satisfying,
Right.
first things that are personally motivating. And to me, I think the fact that this is an institution that uh, charted my wife's course, right?
Mm-hmm.
That took the daughter of a single mother, low income family, and gave her a shot at a higher education. That this institution has a deep legacy in the community that gave me a shot that I grew up in, that the vast majority of my teachers were alums of this institution, that the nurses that took care of me were alums of this institution. Like this institution in very direct and indirect ways poured a lot into me for me to be able to be on this podcast with you today. And so that's important. The other piece of it, I think, is that like professional challenges, crises, and the like, I find myself leaning on what I've personally had to weather. Right, a
Mm-hmm.
lot's been said about my age. Uh, right,
Well, you are the youngest
yeah,
in the state.
yeah. Although the gray hairs are coming in, the last year is taking care of that. I, I will say though that, and then this is kind of how I respond to that, is that in our community, there's a lot of life packed in a few short years, right?
Mm,
And the pandemic kind of accelerated that. I buried more loved ones than I ever anticipated. My journey even to this institution, I was a partner in private practice. That got
mhm,
upended, right? Because faith challenge, right? When our youngest was hospitalized and got really, really sick, that
mhm,
tests will and faith. Uh, and when you come on the other side of that, life has a way of not just humbling you, but
mhm,
has a way of also showing you and revealing to you how strong you actually are. So I think that that has sustained me
mhm,
uh, deliberately by reflecting on that, my worst day is someone's best.
mhm,
That's a reality of life, right? And I think when you take that approach, when you live in gratitude, which like I can preach better than I sometimes practice if I'm being completely honest, right?
I think we're all there.
Yeah. But I try to hold myself to that account. I
Right.
think there's an element there of being worthy
Mm,
of, of the responsibility, not the title. and I think that that sustains me, and it's not something that I certainly more than a year in I don't take for granted. Is that when a student stops me at an admitted students day like we did on Saturday
Hmm.
and tells me, I heard that the president was young, or I heard that the president's Hispanic and he's the only Hispanic higher ed leader in the state. I like reminding them, it's like those things I can't control. I couldn't determine what family I was born into or when I was born, right? Those are just uh, uh, less direct blessings. It's like, but I'm equally proud, and I would hope most people reflect upon it, that I'm a product of this very community. And that is equally rare, right? At a time where it feels like efforts to diversify and become more inclusive are under assault, and not just in red states, right? But across the our geographic paradigm here, the importance of representation extends to lived experience.
Absolutely.
And so
Particularly,
that and so that grounds me, Jacob, right? Like I think that that fortifies me in that, and to be resolute in that I'm on assignment, right? There's work to do, and I need to be worthy of the responsibility I've been trusted to take on.
so I like this. In some ways, it's a homecoming, and we're going to address that issue for you. And I really appreciate this idea of being grounded in faith, because I think you're right. You know, if there's no test and there is no testimony, I'm going to use that quote again.
Yeah, yeah.
So, New Jersey City University is located in Jersey City.
That's right.
For folks who may not be aware of how the state, the geography of the state. It is federally designated or recognized as a minority serving institution in higher education, in particular, Hispanic serving institution, as you mentioned earlier. So, can you describe for the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community your experience, and I think you alluded to this a bit, about being a Latino native or Latinx native son of New Jersey community?
Yeah.
What is that like?
I got to tell you, Jacob, it's I like to think that it means something to the folks that I'm privileged to serve. But I got to tell you, from my vantage point, it's also fulfilling when you see your own story reflected back at you, a
Mhm.
generation perhaps removed, right? Um, and being able to speak to those experiences and recognizing that, like, what is the saying? You can have more degrees in the month of July, and that's somewhat irrelevant, right? Uh, the focus here has been the education that my community has privileged me with, right? Of knowing struggle, of
Mhm.
knowing sacrifice, that it's not just in my household, but in my neighbor's home, right? That those stories inform the way I walk through this world, right? And they certainly inform the way I show up to meetings.
Mhm.
I got to tell you, being the first or the only one to do something or to represent a group is always hard.
Oh, they can also be a bit scary as well.
It is, right? Listen, let's get into it. Like, imposter syndrome is a very real thing. Uh,
Absolutely.
Folks ask me whether I struggle with anxiety, and I was like, no, it comes quite easy, right? I don't struggle with it at all. I think there's that element of like doubt creeps in, right?
Right.
Like, your place is questioned. There is different varying degrees of standards that we're adhered to in our community, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and there's pressure,
Mhm.
undoubtedly. Uh,
Right.
but with enough time, Jacob, I've found this to equally be true. That as alone as the minute I realized that I wasn't stepping into rooms alone,
Mhm.
that I bring my ancestors, that I bring my community with me, that I have special privilege of being an ambassador of sorts, that I try to show up as authentically, right? Like I put my abuela fluency to work, right?
Right.
Doing
Right.
Spanish media, right? And
I love it.
yeah, bringing that to bear, I think it, again, to the earlier question, it fortifies me, right? And
Right.
I think that that's the promise of inclusivity and diversity, right? Is
Mhm.
that we are better off when all our stories are told, right?
Hmm.
And I think that is perhaps the most human thing. We've been talking about it also, right? Like we're not just at a disruption point in higher education, but the world is going to be very different. And I think what is perhaps anxiety driving is that for the first time, probably in modern history, it's hard to predict what the future is going to look like. Like with the technological advances, look at AI, artificial intelligence, right? Um, I think, though, as those unpredictables, the thing that we need to hold on to is our humanity because
Right.
we've been paying the consequences of manufactured compassion for far too long. And so artificial intelligence, right, like is a perhaps a threat in some circles, but I think manufactured compassion, right, and three-letter the alphabet soup of priorities um, un create an undercurrent of that swells to something broader, right, which is that for far too long our communities paid lip service to. That we can talk about the calls for equity and inclusion. But unless we're really able to confront and talk to one another and rather than speak past one another and be less tribal, the truth is that we need to confront the reality that calls for equity feels like oppression to privilege
Hmm.
and being kind of a steward of a mission that is equity oriented, justice oriented, which I believe all of higher education is, right? It's why education, Horace Mann called the great equalizer,
Hmm.
right? There's a reason that there's gatekeepers again in these spaces, and I think that representation is what I try to speak to, and try to do so as authentically as I can, right? Like I check myself, right? Like I take my deep breaths, inhale, exhale after some meetings.
Right.
There's sometimes where like my Cuban American temper is on display, right? But recognizing that like I'm privileged to share time and space at this particular moment with people who didn't ever contemplate the likes of me being, at a table across from them,
Right.
um, and being a part of the conversation is even more important than leading the conversation.
Right. Yeah, and I think, some of those conversations, you talk about the manufactured
Manufacture compassion. Yeah.
compassion, empathy, compassion,
Yeah.
um, with the likes and what have you on social media.
Mhm.
Dr. Elson has talked about in an episode that just released today about being surprised by the impact of social media in higher education.
Right.
But I think, and that manufactured ness removes us or absolves us from having difficult conversations
For sure.
on issues.
For
So,
sure.
so let's continue this line around education effectiveness and equity. From your perspective as a legal mind and educator leader, what is your interpretation of the recent Supreme Court ruling banning race-based conscious affirmative action in college admissions and its effect on colleges and universities seeking to further equity and diversity on their campuses?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. Uh, I think needless to say, I've been pretty vocal about this, that I thought it was a bad decision. I think it ignored legal precedent. I think it's the hyper politicization of all segments of our body politic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think institutions of higher education have an obligation to get creative.
Mm-hmm.
That literally our civil society depends on it as we move towards becoming a majority minority nation. It
Mm-hmm.
is, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, right? And I think we need to evolve, and as uncouth as this might sound, it's like the drivers of economic mobility and equity
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of business sense behind it, right? Like our national progress, our national standing depends no longer on segregated silos of success.
Mm-hmm.
It will literally depend on how we lift up those that have been historically, systematically marginalized.
Right.
And we ignore that cautionary warning sign to our own demise and our own peril. I fundamentally believe that. I look at uh, the breadth of opportunity that exists, right? That multiple things that seem kind of axiomatically opposed are concurrently emerging and arising, right? This generation is the most educated, most technologically advanced of all human civilization, but it is
Mm,
also the first generation that doesn't is unlikely to do better than their parents did.
mm,
I think that that's also part and parcel of some of the partially fair and but mostly unfair criticisms on higher education and the value proposition that it's attacked. I like to remind folks that some of the loudest voices saying that a college degree is unnecessary are folks
right.
with college degrees. Uh, I think being intentional about that. I think really leaning on the fact that higher education is about is about fortifying in individuals a higher level of learning and thinking,
Mm-hmm.
of civic engagement, right? And I think higher education has operated, with all due respect to my peers who have made this their lives calling longer, they sit on this mantle of tradition
Mm,
that sometimes is reticent and resistant to change. And and the grand irony is that on our campuses is where innovative thought is supposed to find its home, where innovative ideas lead to innovative actions,
right.
where breakthroughs are discovered. Um, and it seems like it happens in the lab and in the classroom, but not in the boardroom.
Mm,
And I think there needs to be a more, no pun intended here, affirmative action on the way we embrace the call for equity and effectiveness. It can't just be, the pulling out the thesaurus and calling it something else,
right.
right? Because that'll continue being challenged. I think recognizing that institutions of higher education in a highly segmented population that needs to engage a population that will be, the majority working force in our country, right? That will shape the next century of global influence needs to be one that we talk part and parcel about this being a value that states and the federal government invests in because it's not just a means for mobility, it's a means for sustainability.
Yeah. And and to really further the notion of a democratic society.
Amen, amen, Jacob. I think that that's. I mean, it's ASCU's, the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, tagline for a reason, right? Like public universities in particular are on the forefront of leading for democracy.
Right.
I think so much of what plagues our society and on some of our respective campuses uh, become right in an age of instant gratification and instant communication is the validation of our immediate perceptions, right? And that we talk past one another, that we don't question our own thoughts before we question someone else's,
Mm,
that we scare a lot easier than perhaps we have in recent memory as a society and as people, and that we fall victim to the tropes of what used to be dog whistles now gets echoed through bullhorns.
oh my
Uh,
goodness.
and folks are reticent in pushing back against that
Right.
uh, because it might compromise their status and their standing. And I think we do that to our own demise as a republic. I mean, I'm a student of history, right? I'm mindful. And when I took my oath, when I became a member of the bar, right, and making an oath to uphold the Constitution and its norms, like
Hmm.
reflecting that the founding fathers that didn't look like you or me, Jacob, right? Who was imperfectly designed, right, in virtue and value, aspired to a more perfect union than even the one that they gave birth to. Uh, I'm mindful of an anecdote from history where it said that at the closing of the Constitutional Convention, uh, Dr. Franklin was leaving and walking around, and a woman stopped him and asked him, "What matter of government have you given us, Dr.
Mm,
Franklin?" And his response was, a republic if you can keep it.
Mm,
And there's two ironies to that, right? One, he said it to a woman who wasn't enfranchised for more than a century later. Um, and two, the idea that in that revolutionary spirit is
hmm
one that we only on the fringes embrace as a society, but it really is at the heart of what preserves our republic, right? Of an introspection and an examination of how do we become better.
Right. So I think the idea of, to achieve democracy to sustain it, and I would say equity in this case is a challenge that is always anew.
Yeah.
So it's always changing and evolving. So NJCU has just completed its academic master plan and its first strategic enrollment plan. I hope I have that right.
Yes. Yes.
Thinking about the processes of strategic planning as an example, how is educational effectiveness defined on your campus?
Thank you. Thank you for that. So it's accountability first and foremost. Like if it's worthy of inking to paper, it's something that we're going to measure and track and hold ourselves accountable. It also invites being malleable. I need not wait 5 years to determine if something's working. Uh,
Right,
there's the you know these aren't plans so that they collect dust on someone's shelf, right? These are charters with guardrails, but I intend them to be on this campus living, breathing documents, right?
right,
Who are effectuated by the people that cross our campuses. When I'm particularly proud of this. So we also, Jacob, in early January, unveiled a refreshed mission and vision for our institution, a
right,
bilingual, an English and Spanish version of it, in honor of the communities that we are privileged to serve. Uh, and the vision, everything filters through it, right? If it doesn't serve the mission of this institution, one that I've endeavored to have our campus embrace as one that needs to be differentiable and distinctive from, but to hold a placeholder of that grows with orders of magnitude in the ecosystem of higher education in our state and in our region. I need folks who are in our classrooms and in my financial aid offices and my housekeeping staff and my athletic coaching staff. Everyone on this campus needs to understand that student success is our why and collaboration is our how. And there's a lot said, particularly on college campuses, about labor relations and shared governance. I took the approach very early on that it's hard to hate up close, Jacob, right? Like, so embracing people, making them part of the process doesn't mean that I don't get my ear bent and my ear chewed off from time to time about folks that think I'm missing the mark, but from folks who think that my initiatives aren't bold enough. I'm particularly proud of how we've honored that commitment, not simply paying lip service to
right,
it, of inviting dissent and debate, but also pushing intentionally the envelope from time to time and insisting on urgency from our campus community
mm,
by reminding them who we serve and how urgency is the only way that we move the needle in our community. That I will not allow perfect to be the enemy of the necessary, um, and making
right,
stakeholders feel engaged and active participants, not just passive uh, community members, has been critical. And that's how you deliver on that. And that's why I'm particularly proud of those two strategic initiatives, Jacob, because they are quintessentially the byproduct of a campus community. We didn't outsource that to a consultant. Uh, Again, a lot of great consultants out there, but it was important to me as an institution that is moving from crisis to recovery to revitalization, that the campus community embraces the change management here, that they become in their ways very directly and concretely authors of the next chapter of this institution's rich legacy. And so the fact that the culmination of that is a shared governance, stakeholder-driven work product that puts the guardrails, that acutely defines and narrowly defines our mission. I have found that there are folks chomping at the bit to begin executing on those goals. I mean, there are goals, Jacob, that have already been fully baked in and manifested, because the conversations that began at a strategic workshop in October didn't have to wait until the strategic plan was unveiled in April for folks to start working on it and get the support of the president to effectuate it.
So how would you define educational equity or the equity promise of New Jersey City University?
I say that it's deliberate and intentional, right? Our refreshed mission speaks to who we serve in unabashed, unapologetic terms, right? That are very composite of some of our democracy's most vulnerable voices, but most promising stories. First generation students, adult learners, historically underserved and underrepresented members of our community on our campus, that we define equity by ensuring that we are, while other institutions endeavor to pursue their stance of attracting college-ready students, I want to be a student-ready college, that we meet our students where they are, that we know that the things that plague our students most in their ability to persist and retain and complete in a timely manner the pursuit of a four-year degree is not the academic rigor necessarily. It's life's disproportionate assaults, right? Or housing insecurity and food insecurity that a hungry belly can't feed a starved mind, and taking that holistic approach to student development and student success begins not in the classroom. It begins before the student even sets foot on our campus.
Excellent. So we're having a little technical difficulty here, but we're persevering. I love it. So what has been most rewarding for you so far as president of NJCU?
It's hard to just pick one thing, but I have to say it's always interacting with our students, Jacob. Like I think in ways that I'll never be able to fully articulate what a privilege and blessing this role is. I mean, there are long days and there are long nights and early mornings. Miss more dinners with my sons than I care to admit, although my wife will remind me of them. But at its core, it's been this. My family and my children are everything to me. Mm-hmm. And I've made a pledge to them that nothing will ever pull me from them that isn't for them. And every single day, I feel like I come onto a campus that is, again, equity-driven, it's justice-oriented, where stories like mine aren't uncommon. Mm-hmm. I get to play a role in leading that is incredibly profound. And that has been incredibly rewarding. That not every success invites pomp and circumstance and fanfare. I rejoice really the quiet encounters with faculty and staff and students who I can engage in a private conversation, a fleeting conversation, and feel like I've helped orient individuals to purpose, shared purpose. That's been probably the thing that has brought me the most joy, is seeing that manifest in real time. Not just the folks that just came onto our campus for the first time in the last year, but folks that have been here for, as they like to remind me, longer than I've been alive. But that level of engagement that I think they know that I wear my heart on my sleeve, and that's something that doesn't come without its drawbacks at times, right? But that I care, that I tell people that I like to be known as the chief caring officer, also, right? That 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 I'm deliberate about aligning my personal story to the mission of this institution, because it's like what we discussed at the beginning of our conversation, Jacob. It's at some point, at some time, someone who I don't know
Mm-hmm.
cared about where my story began. And that on this campus, we have that by orders of magnitude in a return on investment for our community and for the lives that we impact. That's been probably the proudest realization that I've been able to come to in the last year.
That's absolutely beautiful. So I have a last question.
Awesome.
I'm gonna present this in a way that you can choose. So,
Okay.
what are your future aspirations for Acebo
Yeah.
or for NJCU? So either way, what something that you want to do next, and I know you're quite busy, or future aspirations for the institution?
I think they're intertwined, at least in the short term future, which is the elevation of our stories.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that perhaps I intimately knew to be important, but prior to taking on this role, recognizing that they're often not shared, even from folks in our community, because there's crabs in a barrel is a very real thing too, right? But setting that aside, that there's a propensity to preserve status, right, and not challenge authority, and it's difficult to challenge it when you become authority, right? And I've been very mindful of that. I possess authority, but I seek to wield leadership,
Right.
right? And I think folks too often in positions of influence conflate the two, or prioritize one over the other, and there's too much authority being wielded and not enough leadership being wielded. I hope that whatever my story has ahead of me, and I hope it's that's a legacy that forges this institution's way forward, is that would be the leadership that we cultivate in our communities is one of folks that are willing to be storytellers, to tell the story of the mom cleans houses so that their son can go to college,
Mm-hmm.
or the mom is a part-time student who crosses our campuses and works the evenings and struggles to find childcare. The value of that story, because that persistence, that tenacity, shapes our futures in very distinct ways.
Thank you for engaging with the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community. You can find this episode and others on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Music. And if you like this episode, please don't forget to follow us and share within your network.